Hawthorne may be here, but she has no color. Here's a look at the Diamond Select, The Walking Dead Comic Michonne Deluxe Action Figure. A former lawyer, Michonne survived her initial outbreak despite losing her boyfriend and her best friend to a walker attack. Unable to finish them off with the sword she found, she instead rendered them harmless and brought them along with her on her quest to find her daughters. Her eventual connection with Rick's tribe gave her family and a home. She never stopped dreaming of those she left behind. This 1/10 scale figure of Michonne is based on her appearance in the Walking Dead comic books and graphic novels. It features multiple points of articulation and a variety of accessories. Before we look at the self-made samurai, let's take the tape measure and see how tall the comic Walking Dead's Michonne stands. And while I'm doing this, I'd like to thank the folks over at Diamond Select, which, much like the review of Rick Grimes, were kind enough to provide this sample of Michonne. Michonne, though, is going to stand at about 6 3/4 of an inch in height, translating, though, to a figure that's about 16.5 centimeters tall. And speaking of Rick, sliding over Michonne, bringing in the earlier looked at Rick Grimes. If, by the way, you haven't had a chance to watch my review of the comic Rick Grimes, feel free to give it a watch after we wrap up things for Michonne. Rick Grimes is, though, going to be taller than Michonne, as it would be the case in the comics and the TV series. As for her accessories, she's a little less than Rick's. In fact, one thing that Michonne can say that she has, that Rick's been bragging about this whole time, is that he had an alternate head portrait. Michonne only just has the one that's attached onto her neck. She, in fact, though, does borrow one other thing from Rick's release, and that's the M16 rifle. Going to bring in right now the M16 rifle and flip this around. You can see they're exactly the same to one another. You know, it does kind of beg the question, if you are collecting the comic Walking Dead figures and you already have a Rick Grimes, what's the need then to have another M16 that's exactly the same? Of course, thinking that again, you have thousands of these walkers. The more firepower you have, the better. The M16 works the same way as Rick's. You basically can take the strap and feed it up the side of her shoulders like this. She does also have quite a lot of space that's going to be filled up quickly, because she does also have a couple of other things that can be strapped around her shoulders. The figure does also come included with a sashed bag. The bag is a much lighter coloring, and of course it does stand a lot more, and we can also fit that on her shoulders as well, but we're not done just yet. The figure has, like both in the comics and the series, she comes with a sheath. She comes also with a samurai sword. You would imagine that if you have this and you have this, that you'd be able to slide one into the other, and you can. Just take the sword, sheath it into that, and then you can just basically sheath that around her shoulders as well. I haven't yet tried this. The problem with, I've noticed, Michonne is that her head, being that she doesn't have an alternate head portrait, it's kind of hard to kind of get it off the ball joint. Now, I haven't yet heated this in hot water, and I probably should have prior to this review. I think there's enough clearance here on the back here that you could probably strap this across her shoulders as opposed to just putting on the one side. I haven't yet honestly tried it, though, but at least for right now, you can easily take the sword and sheath it on the side of her shoulder like that. Of course, talking about swords and all, if you did want to actually put it into her hands, the figure does have actually several hands, and the ones I'm using right now would be perfect to hold the sword. The one thing, though, I did notice when sheathing, holding the sword in her hand, it does look like it's flaked a little bit of paint on her fingerless gloves. Everybody was wearing fingerless gloves. Basically, you just take the sword, slide it into her hand like this, but with like the quarters being so close like this, I mean, it's inevitable that the paint's going to start to flake like this. Of course, I'll have Michonne displayed on my shelf, very predominantly featured here with her sword, but she does also have some alternate hands as well. Now, Rick, I think, had 8 alternate hands. She actually only comes included with 6. Now, she already has gripping hands on the ends of her forearms. The figure does also come included with let's just grab the proper hands here. Kind of like, again, mauling hands or partially relaxed hands. They don't really seem so relaxed. You can see all of them, by the way, have the painted-in fingered gloves. And then the figure also does come included with a couple of gripping hands. Just want to make sure I grab the right ones, the right hands here. Yeah, she does have a couple of gripping hands there too. I mean, she only really has at her disposal technically the M16, and then she has the sword. At least she does have 2 gripping hands to hold both. What's rather interesting also about the hands from Michonne, when we looked at Rick Grimes, I'll actually grab one of Rick Grimes' hands right now. No, where did I put it? Right over here. Rick Grimes' hand actually had the dedicated peg with each one of them. Michonne's, though, is actually the reverse of that. When you do remove the hands, you'll be surprised to see that each of the hands don't have their own pegs. What you do get, though, is a universal ball joint at the end of the forearm, and you basically just have to take every hand that you want to swap out and just plug it back onto the peg, just like that. I guess because the hands are so small anyways, the risk that would probably go along with having pegs on the end of them, the pegs probably would be very small, very thin, and most likely to break. With all those accessories out of the way, though, let's get a closer look at Michonne. I will say, though, while I do really like the Rick Grimes, Michonne might be the better looking figure of the two. The coloring, though, again, is very neutral here with the grays, the blacks, and the beiges. I guess not beiges, the whites. But the coloring looks really quite good. It's a nice contrast, too, because like when you're looking at Rick Grimes' jacket, his pants, and even for that matter, like his deputy hat, everything is kind of in the shade of a really dark gray or borderlining black. Michonne is actually a nice contrast to that because like the majority of the colors for her costume are more of a lighter gray. The head sculpt, though, is really good on this one. And I'm not disappointed, really, that the figure doesn't have an alternate head, because the one that we get right now is perfect for Michonne. Of course, she does have the bandana there across the top of her head. She also has the scarf there featured on the front, and she does have, like similar to Rick, a jacket that almost seems like it's removable. I mean, you probably, in theory, could take the sleeves off or take the arms off and just take the jacket off altogether, and you would still have what seems to be a finished body underneath. What wouldn't be, though, finished is the fact that the sleeves for the jacket would still have to be there. I mean, there's no way really around that. But the coloring, though, for what they get for the character, I mean, again, you're dealing with only really, again, grays, whites, and blacks, but the colors and the shades that they use work really well. In fact, the only thing that's really black on her is the lower legs here, and of course the darker sections of their boots down below. It's a really, really nice looking figure. I really like the way that this one turned out. You got some wrinkles there on the back, the way that's been stretched across the back of the body. Got some nice wrinkles developed there on the sleeves as well. She also has not only fingerless gloves, but some wrappings there around the areas of her elbows too. For the figure's articulation, going back to her head sculpt, Michonne, because she does have a ball joint, allows the head to rotate, I would say, all the way around, but because she has a higher collar, as you are rotating the head, you're going to find there's a little bit of resistance. The head looks down only that far. It can look up, and of course, you can rock it back and forth too. For her arms, though, they rotate all the way around. You can also bring the arms up. But again, I did notice, though, with these figures, getting anything more than a pose like this is impossible. The idea of a T-pose or a 90-degree angle bend just doesn't seem to work with these figures, but 45 degrees is about the stopping point where you can actually bend the arms. Is that a big deal for me? I mean, again, I'm not going to be giving these characters poses like they're in jumping jacks. Having the arms out like at 45 degree, I think is more than honestly enough. At least one thing that we do get, though, is they didn't have to sacrifice the sculpting on the top of the sleeve just to give them then the affordability of having a T-pose. I mean, having at least it looking like it's more finished to the rest of the jacket, I think is more important than an elbow and arm band, I should say, that would be able to bend out all the way at 90 degrees. So again, like while you're only getting 45 degrees, you're still getting a single hinge, though, in the elbow. The arm, I should say, rotates all the way around. And Michonne's hands, where to use these hands or the other hands, do rotate all the way around. Now, they're on ball joints, too, so there's a little bit of give to that, too. The upper torso, though, for the body seems to be on a ball joint. And if you're kind of moving everything out of the way, underneath, though, the scarf, you can see that there's the ball joint there on the top of the torso. So you got the ball joint movement there. And then the figure does have a secondary ball joint at the base of the abdomen. The legs do split out, but because the quarters are so tight with the skirt, that's as far as you can really get the legs. You can kind of move it a little bit further, but that's about it. The legs move forward and move back, but again, they're going to be a little bit more on the limited side. She does have a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Now, with Rick Grimes, when we looked at his figure, the figure did have a swivel cut 3/4 the way up the thigh. I'm looking, though, at Michonne, and it doesn't seem to be the case. No, there doesn't seem to be a swivel or anything like that. There almost even seems like there's an outline or a faint trace of a line where it would suggest that you'd be able to rotate it. But if anything, she could rotate at the top of the legs. She can't rotate lower down on the legs. She has a double hinge on the knee, or I should say a single hinge on the knee that allows at least the lower leg to rotate all the way around. She has also, again, articulation there in the ankle, and you can rock them back and forth as well. Rick Grimes was a nice looking figure, but I kind of, again, feel like maybe Michonne is the better of the two figure releases, which is, again, kind of funny to say that because she has, first of all, less accessories than Rick. Rick had a whole lot more. Rick also benefited from having a secondary head sculpt. Michonne only just, again, had the one. But while I do really like the look of Rick, I do think, though, that Michonne might be the superior figure of the two. I think, as far as I know, again, these are the only two figures that we've gotten so far from the comic Walking Dead figures. I certainly hope, though, more is on the horizon. Sure, you may look at a single hinged elbow and think limited possibilities for posability, yet though Michonne can so easily hold the M16 with both her hands. Mind you, though, with her hands being occupied, there's no way she can hold the sword. Don't worry, the sword can be sheathed and stored on the back of her body. I do think, though, that there's enough slack in the strap that you probably could cross that across her torso, but you can't do it with her head there. I would recommend, though, first heating the head in either a hot water treatment or just running a few passes with the hairdryer just to soften up the joint. I haven't done it yet, though, in this review, and I didn't want to fight it either. But I might just leave it the way that it is. I don't have too much of a bother with the sheath being on one side of her body. Whereas I felt like with Rick's bag worked a little bit better, I think, being across his torso instead. Now, Michonne doesn't have as many accessories at her disposal as what Rick Grimes could say that he had. I mean, she doesn't have an alternate head sculpt, but I think the head on that she has alone is more than enough. I don't think she necessarily needed a secondary portrait. If one was to be included, I feel, with the figure, they probably would have just given her maybe an angrier expression instead. Still, though, between the two figures that we've gotten so far from Diamond Select, I think that Michonne is the better looking figure. I like Rick Grimes, but I think I like Michonne a little bit more. A big thank you again to the folks over at Diamond Select that did provide the sample of the comic version Walking Dead Michonne that we could have a look in this review. Of so far the two figures that we've looked at, which one would you say is the better one? Let me know what you guys think of it down below in the comments section. If also you guys did enjoy this video, you can do it a solid. You can throw it a like. But if you guys want to stick around for more so and you haven't yet done so, make sure you hit that subscribe, make sure you turn on that bell, and of course, make sure you come back. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.